Been so excited. I've been so happy to do these programs for the DeKalb Public Library. This is the last of 4 that I've done, and it's been so much fun with this audience. Today's theme is International Vintage Desserts, and I want to make clear that it's international recipes as based on my vintage cookbooks, which may or may not have done research. I'm going to talk about my collection of over 2,000 vintage cookbooks. When I say vintage, I usually mean like 1930 to 1980, although I have some on either end of that. And then I also have cookbooks that go back to like the settlement cookbook or Civil War times even. But a lot of the ones I'm talking about are from mid-century today. And there are going to be recipes that Meg will also send out. What I want to start with is this first one. And this is actually a 1980 title. I got it at a thrift store, oddly enough, even though I do like to collect cookbooks when I go down to Disney World. But this one had recipes from Epcot and around the world. So notice that's how they get around saying their recipes actually from around the world. They're from Epcot, which are based on other countries. And one they had that really I like in here is trifle, which is something my grandma Curtin made. My grandma Curtin, who came from Ireland. The recipe at Epcot, it said, was shared at both Canada and England's. I'm not sure how that happened, but you know, both countries like trifle, maybe. So it included strawberry jello, cherry, strawberries, and mint. That's a little unusual. I put that in your packets. Usually it's just like squares of pound cake kind of in a big glass bowl with layers of either pudding or something in the middle. And this one used strawberry jello. So that was not a version I had seen before. But let's talk about some other ones. So this is my grandma Curtin, and as I mentioned, she came over from Ireland, and she left just a handful of handwritten recipes when she passed away. You know, she didn't write much down, but I have some of them. My cousins have some, and the ones she left us included like a beef brisket for 50, or Irish coffee, which had a huge amount of alcohol in it, or it had all kinds of types of kolachkis, which I thought her priorities were in the right place there. I love it. And so then every Christmas, she would make fruitcake for the neighbors, and she would start at Halloween and baste it for a month until Christmas. And she would not use candied fruits. She would use dried fruits, which I think makes a huge difference. I've experimented with fruitcake trying to copy the recipe from my mom. And I did find a version from a place it's called Gethsemane Farms in Kentucky. And my mother had these memories of her grandma making it. When she tasted this one, she goes, "Oh, that's it." Let me tell you, that fruitcake, you could pretty much smell the bourbon on the mail truck as it came to my house. It had so much in it. So I tried to copy that, and I basted it a lot and used the dried fruits. My mom loved it, but I don't think it's ever going to be one of my favorite desserts. So that was a tradition my grandma had, that she would make this for all the neighbors. And of course, I mentioned that she loved kolachkis, and a lot of people do. And a lot of people in the Illinois area, especially. I was giving this talk, or I was telling librarians that they should talk about food history. I was doing a training on library programs for people all over the country and Canada, and a lot of them didn't know what kolachkis were. I'm like, oh no, you all love kolachkis. They're just called different things. It's like fold over cookies or thumbprint cookies, different versions. But the official description of them is the sweet bun filled with fruit. And it's all different. It's spelled in different ways. It's made different ways. Caputo's tells me they have an Italian kolachki, which I'd never heard of before. I know there's definitely good recipes from Poland for the kolachki. Some have ice cream melted in the dough. Some have cream cheese. Everybody thinks they have the right way to make it in their family. They're all good. I know there's so many different types and types of fillings. So that folded cookie was the kolachki, but my grandma loved those, and my mother loves them. So from the Complete Holiday Cookbook, 1961, this is St. Patrick's Day, and it has multiple menus with ideas for St. Patrick's Day. And it says, "Leave it to your guests to provide the blarney, and the Irish people are known for their ability to do it." I thought, wow, you maybe wouldn't see that quote in a cookbook today. That's I know they were trying to make a joke. So they suggest shillelagh supper with corned beef, emerald and gold vegetables, tossed greens salad, cabbage salad, Irish bread, Killarney cherry cake, and it had more in it. And then there was the shamrock breakfast, which had honeydew melon balls with lime. Now, honeydew is not native to Ireland. They're just trying to come up with green foods. And then they had ham slices, which of course is not green, Irish soda bread, and cheese souffle. And that's for breakfast. Imagine a morning where you'd want to whip up a cheese souffle. Then it has luncheon. It has all these different menus. And I'm sure they assume that people are not going to make all of them, but it suggests all these menus for the day. Minted lamb chops, green rice. That's what we're looking at there. Rice that has been molded into a shamrock and outlined with parsley. It is kind of cute. Be a lot of work. And it also suggests lime jello and all kinds of, and then of course soda bread. In my family, St. Patrick's Day was always huge. Our favorite soda bread is the one from Jewel Osco. For whatever reason, my mom thinks that one matches the one she was used to the most. My Irish grandmother's favorite St. Patrick's Day food, actually, or drink, was the 2-for-1 Brandy Alexander's at Bennigan's. I don't know if any of you remember that restaurant. It was around in the Chicago suburbs. But that was, I remember all of us going there for St. Patrick's Day, and some of us would have corned beef. And my mom would always make the corned beef. But my mom also likes the item on the right. Then remember, she is 100% Irish. Both of her parents came from there. And her favorite St. Patrick's Day food was the green Hostess snowball. And she used to come to my shows when they would be live. And I would always talk about this. And I remember she was coming to shows around the time where Hostess stopped making things in Chicago for a while before they sold their recipes and everything. And people were comforting her on the loss of the snowballs. I always thought that was funny. So you're going to get a recipe in your packet for edible Blarneystones. And what they are cupcakes like frosted all the way around, like no paper. You bake them, you pull them out of the tin, you frost it all the way around. So it's like a big frosted cake. And then you can put tinted coconut on it. You can even use a piping bag and put some cream in it, but the Hostess snowballs didn't originally have that. They've been around since 1947. And with the rationing of flour and sugar during World War II, they were an instant hit, according to the Hostess website, with Americans looking to indulge in a sweet treat. But they weren't originally pink cream-filled treats. They were white marshmallow and shredded coconut-covered chocolate cakes. So in 1950, they added the cream filling, and then they decided to dye it pink to make it more exciting. So now they have all different flavors, including a glow-in-the-dark sometimes for Halloween. On the left, it suggests making apple pie. That's from Better Homes and Gardens Holiday Cookbook. And you can serve it with the cheese on the side. A lot of people like apple pie and cheese, and I like how they've made the cheese into shamrocks. So different fun ways to do that. And here's some family traditions from my grandma Alessio. I kept my name when I got married. And there she is at a picture at our wedding in 1995. And she made pizzelles. She and her husband like to do that every year for Christmas. Now, those are not the ones she made. Those are perfect and they're store-bought. I actually got some from Caputo's this morning. If I do this show live, I usually serve pizzelles, but you know, we will have to imagine. And so she had a pizzelle maker and would crank them out perfectly. So pizzelles are believed to have originated in the middle region of Italy in ancient times to mark an annual celebration. You know, I don't have luck, as we'll learn, making everything, but the pizzelle maker is pretty fun. It's a great one for the holidays. It can crank out a bunch of cookies easily that look really good. I rarely have mistakes on there, and that is a rare thing indeed for me. I don't have a lot of patience when I'm cooking. You can even curl them up and use them as cannolis. So different fun ways to do it. Grandma Alessio also loved panettone. And what we learned, and there was a particular brand she liked, is every year at Christmas, we would all buy each other this panettone. We realized nobody liked it except for her. And now it's okay. My younger son likes it. My mother likes it, but panettone is very hard to make if you've ever tried. I remember somebody called me at the reference desk and they were looking for an easy recipe for panettone. I'm like, you're not going to find it. It's got like about 12 different spices and raisins and golden raisins and different things. And it's really tall cake. It's like a coffee cake, if those of you who haven't had it. So it's a lot of work, but you can find some nice ones. And of course, I put the quote from The Godfather and talk about cannolis. And I talked about how you can use the pizzelle and roll them up into, that is an easy way to do these. They originally believed to be from Sicilian, and it meant little tube in the Sicilian language, which makes sense. And it usually is fried. The pizzelle maker, if you use it, you can do it just with cookies and then put filling in the middle. But they are usually fried. And then I've seen all different versions of cannolis now. This is another food that has definitely been Americanized. You see like giant ones, like tacos, that are dipped in chocolate and have filling. I saw one that was filled with little cannolis, the outside of it. And I've seen cannoli cake that is decorated at the top with cannolis. I mean, these are extreme versions of this because people love it. So it has ricotta cake in it. It has known to be adapted ever since the early 1900s in this country when Italian people started bringing it over from Italy. So all in the, it can often have candied citrus peel or cherries on the ends, but I think most of us are used to seeing the pistachio nuts on the end of it like that. But what about zeppoli? Zeppoli is a traditional food for St. Joseph's Day, which is March 19th. And what I usually find is that they are, and people, there's no good way to describe this. The Italian version is like a tiny donut hole with a little bit of cream, maybe. And here is the American version, which is like 10 times as large, filled with a luscious filling custard. There's cannoli flavored ones, and it's like an extreme cream puff. They're really good. Easy to make. The recipes are like little Italian donuts with a little mascarpone. I saw on the Food Network once they were making zeppoli, and I thought, yeah, no, that's not the version I know. The version that's usually sold in bakeries and stores, you could cut into four and enjoy it. And on the left is crostoli, which is a fried pastry that apparently my grandma loved to make. She did not make it since I was born, but these you will not find as easily in the stores because they break really easily. They're kind of like the rosette cookies, which we're going to talk about in a minute, from different areas. Well, how about some French cooking? All right, so we've got chocolate mousse. Many wonderful recipes I have for chocolate mousse. I did not put one in your packet because many of them have raw eggs. They didn't cook them, and some of the recipes take 4 hours, which I thought is funny. It doesn't seem like it, right? You see that treat, you think, oh, it's like chocolate pudding. It's kind of rich. Different recipes for it. Eclairs. My son tried to make those this summer. He was part of like this international summer baking camp where they sent him kits. It was like online. Boy, those were hard. They were still really good. They didn't turn out like you would picture in the store, but very hard to make and multiple steps. It kind of makes sense because they've got that cream in the middle. And then we've got madeleines with a special pan that they're usually made, the nice soft cookies. A Charlotte Russe is a French dessert. And French cooking really became big in this country in the 60s when Julia Child made it popular and kind of translated recipes for the home cook, and also Craig Claiborne from the New York Times, who's the food editor. He loved French cooking. And on the left is my vintage cookbook of the French cookbook, 141 world-renowned French recipes, and they do have chocolate mousse with raw eggs, among other things. Now, if you collect vintage cookbooks, there's a lot of those, quote, international ones that some of them are good, some of them are based on French cooking. I would go with Julia Childs. I would go look up the classic one if you want to try some of this. Or there's modern day accurate ones, much better now, right? Or we can find recipes online too. Here's croquembouche, which is the French wedding cake. I don't know if any of you watched Crime Scene Kitchen. You can find it streaming. It was on Fox this summer, and people had to figure out what was made in this kitchen from like scraps and things that were left out everywhere. And then they had to try to make the dessert. So they had like a minute to try to figure out from the wrappers and the dirty pans and things, and then they had to go make it. And one of the weeks was croquembouche, and some of the teams did not know what that was. And I was like, oh, I know this. My boys, just roll their eyes. Yeah, Mom, you know a lot about foods, unusual foods that other people don't know, and especially about Jell-O. But yes, I do know about croquembouche. So it is a conical shape. It's most often served at weddings. Those are a bunch of cream puffs. They are held together, and this one has chocolate glaze over the top. Sometimes they have spun sugar around them. Sometimes they have caramel toppings. And so according to foodtimeline.org, they have been around, the cream puff has been around since the late 1500s, a version of the cream puff. And they first saw the croquembouche in the late 1700s in France. It is becoming more and more popular in this country, as is evidenced. from it being on that show. And I think they had to make it in like different colors and things. And the Crime Scene Kitchen is a delight. I learned about a lot of cakes and things I didn't know, but then there were several obscure ones that, of course, I knew all about from my collection. How about Petit Fours from France? Look at all these different cakes. This is from the do-it-yourself uh, party book, and they imagine that you do it all yourself, that you would make all of these for a party. I could probably handle a couple of these. There's a few little snowballs at the bottom, like the Hostess one. There are some, the jelly blob one I could probably do, maybe the shaved chocolate, but this would be a lot to do for a party. I bet a lot of us would love to attend a function that had all these fun little cakes, but imagine making them all for a function. That would be hard. I'm not sure it is do it yourself like it says. Now, I did put recipes for some of these in your packet, but I did not put like the butterscotch mincemeat diamond like on the left side of the page. Different flavors coming into vogue. There's a walnut diamond. You don't see walnuts as much except with holiday cooking now. There are a few here that would be popular. Certainly, maybe you could dip some of the little cakes in chocolate and have that be more successful. It's making me hungry, though. I don't know. Looking at all of these, I don't know about you. All right. And now we have the rosette cookies as promised. And this is a picture from my complete holiday cookbook from the 60s. And the top cookie there is from the Spritz cookie gun, you know, the cookie press is the term. I've blanked out there for a minute, and it's made into wreaths, and then they added little decorations. But the rosette is a thin, deep fried pastry. It's actually of Scandinavian origin. I know a lot of people think it's from France. There's a different version of this that comes from Mexico too. So it's so much fun. It's like the kolackky to see which recipe comes from which region, what variations, and then they come to this country, and it's like some of the recipes kind of exploded into something entirely new, like the zeppole. So these are made with in a hot iron in hot oil, and it's like on the end of the iron has the dough, and they put it in the hot oil very hard to get it off the iron, so they turn out perfectly. And you can imagine they're very fragile, beautiful cookies. And I have some friends that make these successfully. I have not attempted these. I do love to sample theirs though. Usually served at the holidays, as you can tell from the picture. And what about crepes? So from the Better Homes and Gardens 1976 crepes cookbook on the left, it says it's no more difficult to pronounce crepes than it is to make them. Okay, that's wrong. And it says the word rhymes with crepes, is French, and sounds just right with crepe Suzette. Thin pancakes are wraparounds for morsels of meat or sweet in a good many other countries. Or you can call them crepes, rhymes with drapes if you prefer. Okay, maybe they were trying to fill space when they added that copy to the cookbook. But the ones on the left are very popular in the 60s and 70s to light them up with alcohol, as you'd have flaming crepes, just a fun way to present them. On the right are my version. I got a crepes cookbook, and I remember I got it at a used bookstore, and the woman's like, honey, I brought that one in here. The woman was checking me out, and she goes, those are impossible to make. She goes, nothing's going to turn out right. And I was thinking, oh, if only you knew. Only none of mine turn out right. But of all things, this one turned out pretty good. Does it look attractive? No way. It looks scary there, but they are, I wrapped them around bananas. I made crepes in just like, I have a little skillet. I wrapped them around bananas, and we made a chocolate peanut butter sauce for them. And this was like some day off school or something. And they turned out, they were so delicious. The boys said they tasted like waffles. So if you haven't made crepes before, it is kind of fun to experiment with different types and the savory fillings. Don't be afraid of them. They might not turn out like the ones on the left, but they might still be delicious. Okay, so here we have egg bread. And this shows up in a lot of the vintage cookbooks. And the one on the left goes all the way back to the 40s, and it's got like a holiday Easter bun there. And you can tell that it's got a hard-boiled egg baked into the top of it. And you see this from in both Italian and Greek breads for Easter. And on the left, as I mentioned, is the Italian version. And on the right is the Greek Orthodox, and it's the traditional red egg. And from my Southern Living Celebrations, and I want to just take a minute. The Southern Living, Southern Heritage series has a lot of background and information on celebrations. And you can read them like a novel. It's so interesting to get the background. I do have like a whole chapter of Mardi Gras foods and things like that. They're not always celebrations that are popular up north here, but it said for this one, the children shout Christos Anestes, and each with a brightly dyed red egg in his hand tries to crack the egg of his adversary. The child with the last unbroken egg is declared the winner. My son's girlfriend is Greek Orthodox, and I asked her about that, and she said they still do a version of that with the red eggs. But I was interested in the bread around it. So the half dough can be shaped into three 22-inch ropes, braided, shaped into a circle, and the ends pinched together. So you make the roll, and then you have the egg in it when it's baking, the already hard-boiled egg. I think there's different ways to do it. I have not made this myself. My family does get some of the Italian versions for Easter. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that one. And how about baklava? And I don't know why the picture is fuzzy. So baklava is a Mediterranean dessert made with phyllo dough, nuts, butters, and sugar, and a sweet syrup is poured over the entire thing. Several groups claim that they invented baklava. This is going to be like the KOLACKY, and one is Lebanese. And it shows that it is most believed to be of Assyrian origin around the 8th century BC. Here's another one that's been around a long time. Thin layers of dough with nuts, poured honey over it, and that is how they ate it then. You can kind of see how these foods evolved. And so then by the time it moved to Turkey or to Greece, it became more elaborate and had like richer filling poured over it and more layers, and it became the sumptuous dessert it is. Usually served in very small squares because it is very rich with a lot of layers and sweetness in it. Now, this is a 1958 title a friend of mine from the library gave. It had belonged to her mother. Look at that braided bread, that gorgeous bread. Imagine the work in that one. It's like 3 breads put together and made to go with the fancy salmon and their special meal there. Looks like they're celebrating Hanukkah with that one. There's a whole chapter on knishes, pierogies, and blintzes. And blintzes, a lot of people in this country see is like a brunch food. A lot of times if there's a brunch buffet, you see a lot of cheese blintzes, but of course, like the crepe, it's got a lot of uses. Blintzes are like a pancake that only uses yeast in the batter sometimes, or it's fried. According to the book, it says blinis came into English from the Yiddish form with the spelling blintz. They were popularized in the US by Jewish immigrants. And they are popular at Hanukkah because it's a fried food. You want to have foods that are fried or cooked with oil for that tradition. And so lots of different versions. The cookbook suggests that you can have fillings with potato, apple, or raisins. They can be served with sour cream, jam, or caviar, or they can be folded or rolled into a tube. So it's a lot like the crepe, different ways of if the crepes were always fried. So it's kind of fun to see how the different foods evolved. And then other things for Hanukkah, there's the potato pancake, of course, because fried in the hot oil to go with the tradition of the oil lasting 8 days. A lot of grocery stores in my area serve arugula year round, and they especially bring it out for every single Jewish holiday. But arugula is not a Hanukkah food. It's more for the spring Passover along with flourless chocolate. So the arugula is a picture of it there from one of my vintage cookies, and they referred to it as rollover cookies. And it's all kinds of fillings. So like a rolled cookie that has chocolate, dates, prunes, or honey, like spread on one side of the dough before it is rolled up and baked. And they are quite good. All right. So how about smorgasbord? From 500 Tasty Snacks, the picture on the left, 1950. It said, smorgasbord has grown deep roots in our national affections until now we feel that it belongs to us. The very sound of the word implies relaxation, not for the host. Look at that spread. That is very fancy, and it's supposed to be like a quick brunch. It's hard to believe. And they have something in there called igloo canapes, which always make me smile. It's an example of a vintage recipe that is a lot of work for no good reason. And there's always going to be some recipes like that you make extra fancy, but this one's kind of silly. It does sound tasty though. So you have 4 hard-boiled eggs, and they use anchovy filling, which I would not. I would use the filling for double stuffed eggs. And they have rounds of breads. You got the round bread, and they take half of one of the hard-boiled eggs and put it on top like an igloo with the filling in it. And it says you can use cream cheese to make sure it stays on the bread. So it looks like an igloo. That seems kind of odd, right? Why don't you serve deviled eggs or maybe sliced hard-boiled eggs on top of the bread and have mini sandwiches? Different ways to do it that might not take as long. And 4 eggs only makes 8 of the appetizers. On the right is Better Homes and Gardens 1963 book. I'm always amused by that one. The color has not been distorted by putting it on a slide. The drinks really are that neon green. And the recipe for that one says use a whole bottle of green dye. And that comes up a lot in the vintage. It says use a whole bottle of red or a whole bottle of green. It's crazy. Maybe they were sold in different types then. I'm not sure. But some of the things they have by 1963, they were trying to show that they had international recipes in all of their cookbooks. So they have something called the sombrero spread. They have India recipes and they have Asian recipes or meal suggestions, but often they talk about the decor because they may or may not have known actual recipes from that region. So yeah, it was sometimes just a marketing ploy, but there are still some good derivative recipes, and I'll talk about a few of those. These are EBELSKIVERS. They're Danish. They are made in a special pan. They are completely round, like a golf ball. And so most often they have apple fillings in them. They are fried dough. And a lot of people, they're very popular again at the holidays. I would love to know how to get it cooked all the way around. You must have to turn them. And this is from my Better Homes and Gardens holiday cookbook. And it says you should ethnic traditions make special holiday items for friends and neighbors. Now, take a look at that basket. For one thing, the 2 cards that say Merry Christmas and For the Smiths are actual cookies. They are decorated to look like little cards, which is amazing to me. Now, so they have some great traditional ethnic cookies in there, and I've listed some on the right that people will recognize, some of the German cookies. But in the middle of that is a quick coffee cake made out of the Pillsbury biscuit dough, where it is rolled and they put candied cherries in it and sliced it and spread it. Now, I'm making that sound easier than it is. It is something you can look up. Something they mention also for the holidays, from my Southern Heritage Family Gatherings volume. It says, if you want to host a German style Christmas Eve supper for Texans, which, where would they even come up with that combo? Assorted German sausages, sliced beef jerky, homemade yeast loaves, cooked cheese, Christmas cookies, lemon cookies, and some of the German cookies. Now, I know that there were a lot of German immigrants in some areas of Texas, but none of my friends that I've talked to from Texas has ever had sliced beef jerky for Christmas Eve. So I think there the cookbook was just trying to, what would Texans like or whatever. It's just kind of funny, but there were some things in there that sounded good. All right. This is from the Hungarian Cookbook 1955. A friend of mine from the library, a colleague, gave it to me. It was his mother's, and it has a lot of her handwriting and opinions in it, which is amazing. But she's got the apple strudel here. The recipe is 2 pages, and it takes days to make all the different elements of it. And look at how thin it is. That they are putting it that thin, trying to get it as thin as possible without tearing it. So you have multiple loaves or layers. You've got the filling. It says you can make it with apples or cherries, and it's a huge project. And there's more about this. It says it needs to be as thin as paper so you can see through it. And on the right, there is a drawing of how to do this. That is not his mother. That is the person who wrote the cookbook. That is Marie Rosecki from 1949. Tom, my friend, his mother wrote things in the recipes like not bohemian enough, which I enjoyed. Some of the recipes had been Americanized for sure. And look, she's got her strudel there, complete with a diagram of how to spread it on the table on the right side. So use glove on top. She's got all kinds of tips on there about how wide it needs to be, how far away from the edge, and how to make this. And I bet it was delicious, even if it took a few days to get the whole thing done, all the different steps. Here's a recipe I hadn't been familiar with until I saw it in my farm journal. Now, Farm Journal is an amazing vintage cookbook series. If you collect older cookbooks, I highly recommend the Farm Journal ones. You can find no nonsense recipes. There are a lot of things that you probably already have in your kitchen, like this one that I've listed out. You might not have the mixed candied fruit or some of the other, but most of this is pretty normal ingredients. Maybe the yeast is not something you use every day. So in Farm Journal's Great Home Cooking in America, they try to take ethnic recipes and Americanize them. And this is one for OLIEBOLLEN, which is an unusual donut filled with apples and raisins, served in Holland during the holidays and always on New Year's Eve, served with big pictures of milk and freshly brewed coffee. I might need a lot of coffee if I'm going to be staying up all night, although I certainly would like to eat these. What these remind me of are fried fruitcakes. So the raisins, it says poke through the dough, giving them an unusual shape. A not too sweet donut that is moist on the inside and crisp and crusty on the outside. So it's kind of like the Abelskivers that we saw, only it's got like raisins and dry fruits in it, and then it's fried. And you think about, I think of these as fried fruitcakes, although they sound pretty good. All right, how about Linzer cookies? All right, so I have found Linzer cookie cutters that are usually about $50. You can certainly do hearts in different shapes that might be a little simpler, or maybe you use small cookie cutters for that top part, but getting that scalloped edge and the shape out of the middle might require a cutter. From foodreference.com, it says Linz is the third largest city in Austria. It is also the home of the Pez candy. Originally marketed in Vienna in 1927, Pez candy and Pez dispensers came out of that area, which is wild, but that also made the Linzer tort and the Linzer cookie. Now, the Linzer tort is a tart made of rich, buttery dough, accentuated by almonds, lemon zest, and cinnamon. That sounds fabulous. The tart is traditionally filled with black currant preserves and topped with a lattice crust. In America, raspberry has replaced the currant as the jam of choice. I can't think when I've seen the Linzer tort anywhere. It seems to be different. And it is one of the eldest known torts with a recipe discovered in an Austrian abbey dating back to 1653. And so then they came up with an easier version of it, which was the cookie, although this takes a lot of work. Now you can actually find a Pepperidge Farm version of the Linzer cookies at the holidays, but they don't bake very many. It's like a cookie with a stained glass window pattern cut out of the top, and they use strawberry jam on the inside. It is not as good as these like thicker dough ones with the layer of jelly, but still they are quite tasty, but it's hard to find them. All right, what about Swedish pancakes? Very big in the 70s. And from 1963, Better Homes and Gardens meals with a foreign flair. It says, you'll think you're in Stockholm when you taste these delightful pancakes topped with part sweet sauce. Keep them warm in your prettiest chafing dish. Guests will rave about the wonderful flavor. Okay, how many of you have a chafing dish, and do you know where it is? I can't remember the last time I've used one. I think we have one somewhere in the basement. Maybe we bring that out for like Thanksgiving. But here they're using it for Swedish pancakes, and they're serving it with lingonberries. And they are like pancakes. It's three like pancakes you'd serve like traditional ones here for breakfast. So it's just like 3 eggs, milk, flour, sugar, and salt. And then you cook them and then served with lingonberries. And have you ever had these at IKEA? They're quite good. Or maybe you make your own. Here's PEPPERAKRAKOR. And that is a picture I used for the KOLACKY before, but now we're looking at the kind of flower-shaped ginger cookies. So these are traditionally associated with the feast day, the Santa Lucia, on December 13th. And the description from my cookbook is, on her feast day, the eldest daughter in each family dresses in a white dress with a red sash and wears an evergreen wreath with 7 lighted candles on her head. She carries coffee and buns to each family member, and everyone thanks the Queen of Light. It's changed quite a bit in this country. And what I find really interesting is that there's a town called Bishop Hill in Illinois. And if you like these kind of festivals and the foods and the traditions, you might want to investigate it. Even during COVID, they had a version of their Santa Lucia festival. It is their huge thing of the year. And so you can order the hot cross buns ahead of time. But of course now the candles are battery operated. They have different versions of it and parades, but the PEPPERAKRAKOR cookie has a tradition itself. So you put one of those on your palm and you use your finger and break it, and then we press in the middle. And if it breaks in 3 equal parts, you will have good luck through the next year. Well, I used to do this. We used to do like a holiday party with my teen advisory board when I worked at the Schaumburg Library. And so we would all try this. And what I liked is that the teens would keep doing it with more cookies until they got the result they wanted. I'm not sure how that affected their luck. I just thought it was funny. And I had a librarian whose family was from Sweden. And I said, well, where can I get some of these cookies that are traditional? And she said IKEA was her family's favorite, which I thought was funny. So here is fondue, and this is from 1970. Gourmet International's The Fine Art of Fondue, Chinese Wok, and Chafing Dish Cooking. It's a whole chapter on flaming foods in this cookbook. So fondue, as we know, was huge in the 70s. And to fill the cookbook, they try to come up with some unusual versions. The ones that were most useful is like cheese or chocolate, or even cooking little cubes of meat in the hot oil if you've ever eaten at the melting pots. But the cookbook suggests that you make these pies, which are like little pierogies, and then you dip them in hot oil. And it says this is good for kids to do. I wouldn't. I would bake them, and maybe have them dip in chocolate when they're done. But there's all kinds of ways to use the fondue pot. If you haven't used it, or if you have one, you haven't used it in a while, there are safer ways to do it with the plug-in ones that don't get beyond a certain temperature. There's a lot of fun ways to do it. And here's Bavarian cream. Now, food historians from Sweet Southern Living, Southern Heritage series, food historians tell us that Bavarian cream is a cold molded gelatin based dessert originating in France in the early 19th century. So the connection with Bavaria is obscure, but a survey of historic cookbooks reveals American recipes titled Bavarian cream first appeared in the 1880s. So this is molded similar desserts to the ice cream bombs, bombays. They would have in different shapes, and there's a whole area of collecting that are ice cream molds or these Bavarian cream molds, and it looks beautiful, right? The way it's made. And a lot of people think of Bavarian cream in the context of donut fillings today. Oh, actually, that's from Food Timeline. All right. So this is a Jell-O version of a Bavarian cream. So the molds are bigger. And I also have a version of it from the Junior League cookbook from 1976, a peppermint Bavarian, but they don't mold it. They just make it into squares for the holidays. Again, if you like to collect, the Junior League cookbooks are hard to get your hands on. Those are very popular for whatever reason. A lot of, they're usually large volumes, with a lot of different Southern type of recipes. Well, this is an example of one of the meals that is not quite well researched. This is from Meals with a Foreign Flair from 1963. And it seems to me like they were saying, okay, we need some sort of German meal. What can we include? Okay, let's have beer, let's have this. No, it's not necessarily, but some of the foods are quite good. Look at all that meat, though. It has, and it's got piped potatoes around the edge of it. That is not, I've had wonderful German cooking. It also suggests that you include it with corned pig knuckles. Did I type that on my list? I probably didn't, because that one didn't appeal to me. Boiled beef, grilled, pre-cooked bratwurst. Probably not. The chocolate shells it includes are good, though, and those are going to be in your packet. It's just like a simple cookie. And then from my complete holiday cookbook, 1960s, it has a German beer garden menu. And it says they also had chocolate shells, are made of heavy meringue that you are supposed to press with a thumb to resemble seashells. That does not seem to be a traditional ethnic dessert, although it does sound tasty. I don't know if I would use my thumb to create seashells. Okay, on the left is the panettone that my grandma loved. Brand is still popular, although I notice now they have like chocolate panettone or coffee flavored, or they have little ones, which are nice for gift giving, or they have massive ones for parties. It seems to have kind of changed like some of the other things. But on the right is Stollen, which is very similar, only with not the leavening that the panettone has. So Stollen is a loaf-shaped cake containing dried fruit and covered with sugar, powdered sugar, or icing sugar. It's traditional German cake. It's got a lot of different names. There are similar versions in Dutch and Italian, and as we've mentioned, other countries. Okay, so German and Viennese tortes. This is probably one of my favorite recipes to talk about with the program. And this is, again, on the left, 147 superb German and Viennese recipes. Not sure that's true. It does have some good recipes in it, though. On the right is from Better Homes and Gardens, Meals with a Foreign Flair. The ingredients they use are probably not what you want to see in Black Forest cake. In Black Forest cake was used in Crime Scene Kitchen too, if that's something you want to watch. But here they say purchase a sponge cake and carve out the middle of it and put in a can of cherry pie filling, which is not the way you want to do it. A Black Forest cake. Definitely it has dark chocolate, it has cherries in it, it has a layer of cake. That is not, I would not use cherry pie filling on it. But there again, they were trying to get at the essence of the thing and make it easier or more Americanized. And I think they kind of missed the mark. Look at the slices of it with the cut out cherry filling. That's a very interesting way to eat cake. All right, so special occasions, stack cake and shortcake. On the left is from my Southern Living Southern Heritage, where it talks about the history of the stack cake from the Appalachian Mountains. It actually goes back even further to the Viennese torte, which can be 14 to 25 layers. There's a woman named Rose Birnbaum Levy that she has the most wonderful baking cookbooks. They're considered like reference books. So there's one on pies, cookies, cakes. I know they have them at the library. And she was a self-taught baker. She and her husband had a bakery, and her torte had 25 layers and super thin. And so the stack cake is kind of a derivative of that. And it came from an area where for parties, everybody would bring a small layer of the cake, and they would stack them. That is hard to imagine. I like the version they made there, which is spice cake with cinnamon on top, and they've cut even like more narrow layers, and they put applesauce in the middle of each. They said stack cake could also be made with crepes or pancakes with applesauce in the middle, and the cake further back on there shows that. Different ways to do it. And on the right is the Southern Heritage, Southern Living Cake says that shortcake came over because Southerners liked biscuits. And it was also kind of a version of the strawberries and cream that came from Europe to the South. And it says you can also make this with oranges, peaches, or different ways to do it, which is fun. You think a strawberry shortcake with layers of, there's angel food cake, or there's the way they did it here, like a form of biscuits with cream or strawberries. It'd be fun to try with peach. Peach would be good, or orange, the different flavors. I've never experimented with that one. This is from the Complete Holiday Cookbook, the Mexican Bullfight Buffet, which is ridiculous. Bullfights were from Spain, and it's not nothing about this other than that little statue of the bull makes this a traditional fare. But there are some interesting foods in here. They have olive beef tostados, guacamole salad, frijoles, Mexican fruit turnovers, and siesta tea. And on the right is a 1972 brunches and lunches. It says orange avocado salad with chilaquiles, buñuelos, and Mexican chocolate. Say Mexican brunch is underway. Well, they're pulling Mexican recipes from a lot of different holidays and traditions and trying to put them together into a buffet. Wonderful Mexican foods. We're lucky in the Chicago suburbs, a lot of Mexican grocery stores that you can get traditional foods. But this is an example of how they didn't really research, but a couple of those recipes sound fantastic. I would love to see what the orange avocado salad is, and you can see they have a picture of it, and it literally just looks like orange and avocado now that I look at it. But some of their other recipes certainly look very good on that display. And here is from Southern Heritage Celebrations. It says Mexican wedding cookies. And this is another one that has a lot of names from a lot of traditions. It could be like the snowball cookies. It says it comes from Los Pastores, which is the mystery play of the 1700s performed during the holidays. And it said that people would travel throughout the town performing the story of the Christian story of Christmas with baby Jesus, and then people would serve these foods, including the Mexican wedding cookies. So that was the tradition came from. And it's a lovely idea. And it also says to serve sweet potato empanadas, the little Mexican wedding cakes, cookies, and to offer them fried tortilla chips. If somebody was performing a play on my lawn, I think I would do better than tortilla chips, although the cookies would be quite good. From Good Housekeeping's Foods with a Foreign Flair, it says these are India squares from India. They have unsweetened margarine, eggs, sugar, baking powder, salt, vanilla, chopped walnuts, or pecans. I'm not sure that comes from India. There's lots of wonderful Indian groceries and restaurants in my area. That is not a recipe I've ever seen, though it sounds quite good. It just sounds like fudge. And they were trying to twist it up a bit. Although the recipe on the cover looks like it was something that was adapted from an actual ethnic recipe. And they have, and that is what I wanted to talk about from that one. It looks like good fudge, though, it does. All right, here's Hawaiian appetizers. Not quite international, but when Hawaii joined the States, every single cookbook wanted to have, quote, Hawaiian recipes. And this is like some of their international recipes, not always had research. There was like a hint of something ethnic in there. So with Hawaiian, most of the time they just included pineapple and called it Hawaiian, or they would say it was tropical if it had macadamia nuts. But here's the cover of McCall's Cocktail Time Cookbook, and they have a big cheese ball that looks like a pineapple. It says use the actual pineapple fronds for the top of it, though. A lot of work to make this one. Traditional cheese ball, but then you need to carve up the outside into the perfect grid with the olives. I have a friend who used this for her retro book discussion, and she took my suggestion and turned it on its sides. You only have to decorate like half of it, and you can still use the fronds and everything else. But she said people are very charmed by this, but it is a lot of work. And here's another recipe that totally misses the mark from Hawaii, but it is one of my favorites in all my cookbooks just because it makes me laugh. This is fish sticks Polynesian. It's made to look like a volcano. From Better Homes and Gardens, I think this is the Quick Time Meals, 1974. A good use for leftover rice? Probably not. It is amusing that it looks like a volcano. My boys want me to try this one. I'm not doing it. I do love the carrot curls on the top, though. But it says this is, makes it look like Hawaii. It really doesn't. All right, so how about some good African American traditional recipes? And you'll find those in some Southern cookbooks, a lot of good church cookbooks, and you can find some wonderful soul food cookbooks in more modern times. But in past decades, it was mixed in with some of the Southern recipes, and one was for Benny cakes. Now, my boys are African American, and we celebrate Kwanzaa, and so I was determined to make Benny cakes, which is a traditional food for that holiday. And they're just like thin lemon, and here they have them as cakes. They can be made as cookies, lemon poppy seed. So I made them, and for whatever reason, they all melted together like peanut brittle, and so I broke them apart. But they were quite tasty, but by no means would I have a photograph of those to show at a program. But this is from Southern Heritage Celebrations Christmas tea. You're supposed to stew this the day after Thanksgiving, if you can believe it. So you'd be still cleaning up and having those leftovers, and you'd be preparing this elegant tea to kick off the next season. And it includes fruitcake, of course, for the holidays. You can just barely see that in the front there. And it's got some of the Benny cakes and some other little desserts there. All right. Well, how about almond cookies? There's my cover for meals with a foreign flair. 100 recipes from 18 countries. Yeah, 18 countries is not like a good international cookbook, but from 1963, it has an Asian dinner. They call it something else, which I don't want to say because it's not an acceptable term anymore. And it includes things like Chinese walnut chicken, rice, asparagus, cucumbers, ginger fruit, almond cookies, and green tea. It says that Chinese cookery is as much an art as the carving of delicate jade. The ingredients are cut up prettily and combined in exciting ways. Now that is very true. And it says you can eat with chopsticks if you have a yen. And of course, that's terrible, the pun. But the almond cookies, I have always wanted to recreate those, the ones from Chinese food restaurants. And I will have a recipe in your packet for some delicious almond cookies, lightly flavored. And then my last slide, and this is a fortune cookie crepes. And this is that crepes cookbook that the woman told me I wasn't going to do very well in. And she was not entirely wrong, although they were tasty. And so it says you can easily make your own fortune cookies with a crepe. And what you do is you write your fortunes, and then you make the crepes, and it's got flour, sugar, cornstarch, and salt. You beat in cooking oil, egg whites. You're going to get this one. And then you fry them. But while they're frying, it says you have to quickly turn them and start working to fold it while it's cooking before it gets too hard. It's hard to imagine this. You certainly could do it with soft crepes and put in a fortune, and that might be add a fun aspect to a meal. But it's hard to imagine. It says you can shape it over a bowl and then folding quickly before it gets cool. A lot of work, but I definitely would like to eat one and see what that looks like. And I believe that is the last of my slides.